Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Flying Over 50 at Any Age. I'm Cyrus Webb, joined by my lovely co-host, the author of the best-selling book by that same name. So glad you guys could join us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X. Going to go ahead and welcome in those tuning in on Instagram as well. Glad you all can be with us. And we're going to connect with our friends over on Amazon as well so we can get into today's show. And I think you guys are going to really found this one really powerful and a great reminder for us all. And we're now live on Amazon Live for Flying Over 50 at Any Age. Glad you all could join us for our broadcast for today. If you guys are new to us on the show, going to type you guys in a welcome message here. Welcome. Make sure you guys do hit that follow button. Have a lot of great programming coming up today. So make sure you guys hit the follow button in this corner or down below. You also will see the book by our guest and my co-host, Makeda Smith. Her book, Flying Over 50 at Any Age. Makeda, we made it to week 15. How we doing?
Hi, Cyrus, and I'm going to ask you to take a breath and breathe.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Woosah.
Okay.
Cyrus got so much stuff going on, y'all don't even know.
Well, look, I appreciate that. Allie's joining us over on Instagram. Hey, Allie, good to see you. Welcome to you. So, Makeda, week 15. We made it. You say, oh, it's so far away. It's so
halfway mark. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus.
How does it feel to be at week 15?
Week 15 feels a lot different from week 1. Yes. Yeah. I'm more relaxed. I've gotten used to this whole podcasting thing. It's all good.
Good deal. Good deal. But isn't that interesting the way you phrase that? Because isn't that how it is in our lives, right? You know, as we start, it gets so much easier, right? But the important thing is that start. That's why I'm so glad you had this great idea, Makeda, so we could be able to talk about this book this way, because it is such a great thing. And today's message is going to be really good. But before we get into today, I do want to say, Makeda, when I was reading this message, before we get here, you have already shared with us some low moments, right, in your life. But you've also been able to share with us the highs. I want to talk about resilience first before we read today's message, if you don't mind, because the reason why I saw someone post today, it was Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey posted today on Threads that we have to stop saying when something bad happens that we have a bad life. He says we have to recognize that's a bad moment in our lives. He said the moment we start defining ourselves by that bad thing, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Yeah. How is that philosophy? How have you been impacted by that? Because you've had some dark moments, but you haven't let that define you. How has that happened for you?
Well, I think sometimes I did let it define me, but I had to move past that definition. But I think it goes back to what I said last week. In terms of experiences, whether we can label experiences positive or negative, but in actuality, they're really just experiences. Yeah. And they're experiences that are constantly moving us to the next experience, to the next experience. So even though it's really difficult when you're in the moment of that experience not to let it define you, you have to know that there's another experience on the way. Yeah. And that's what keeps you in the flow state.
Yeah. And that ties in so perfectly with today's message. But again, today's message keeps that, as you just said about the flow state, I've talked about week after week, to me, is that movement. You know, it's all about that movement. But in this case in particular, as we talk about week number 15 or day 15, for those who have Makeda's book, it really is about the choice to move. Let's talk about that for a second, Makeda, because you could have chosen at any point, whether it's something that happened to you personally or professionally, to just stop. Yeah. What do you think helped you to make the choice to keep moving?
Well, I have to say that in a lot of those moments, I literally did stop. But I stopped knowing that it was just a reprieve and I was going to eventually have to move again. So I realized that the stopping was not permanent, but I did have to take a break and stop. I think what happens with a lot of us is that we stop and we think that that stopping point is the end, and sometimes we get stuck there for longer than we need to be stuck there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that ties in perfectly with day 15 in Makeda's book, Flying Over 50 in Age. Makeda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, Cyrus. Day 15. I didn't come this far just to get this far. Have you ever been so close to reaching a goal, but were so depleted that you just want to give up? I always tell my friends and clients, if you had an aerial view of what was just around the corner, you would forge full speed ahead. Like a runner when they get a burst of speed right before the finish line because the finish line is right in front of them. During the Great Recession, or what I call my Great Depression, I literally felt suicide was the solution, but knew I had to stick around for my daughters. I couldn't leave them with nothing, let alone by themselves in this seemingly cruel world. Oh, it was a struggle, but I knew I didn't come this far just to get this far. I also knew from the many books I had read and movies I had watched, all great heroes and sheroes experience extreme calamity, but it is the comeback that made them legendary. Have you ever felt so defeated that have you ever felt so defeated that you were simply depleted? I'm here to tell you you didn't make it this far just to get this far. Think about something momentous that you overcame. Maybe it's something you are going through right now. Expand your sight to an aerial view. Can you see the victorious end of your story, which is, in fact, a new beginning?
Wow. And again, such a powerful message. And we're going to talk about the photo here in a moment. Was this, considering that you've talked about some darker moments already, Makeda, was
Mhm.
this chapter um, more difficult for you? Or what was it like for you now looking back at it?
Um, it's interesting because just reading the chapter, it kind of takes me back there,
Mhm.
and I have to like breathe. I
Yeah. Yeah.
had to breathe because back then during the recession, I think that was like 2008 when I lost everything, and a lot of people lost everything.
Yeah.
That was like, that was really dark, dark. That was really a dark, dark, dark time. It was probably one of the darkest, and I've been through some dark times, but I think that was one of the darkest times.
Yeah.
But it was also a time that in that darkness, it really pushed me and made me more resilient and made me rely on my faith and made me rely on what I knew was the truth as opposed to succumbing to what was false.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What, for myself as a reader, Makeda, reading this particular day, what I thought
Mhm.
about was that what helped you to realize what you write here, and that is, I didn't come this far just to get this far. And the
Mhm.
reason why I think that struck me is because we've seen you go through job changes, we've seen you go through betrayals in business relationships, we've seen personal relationships break down, right? We've seen
Mhm.
those challenges, and yet you were able to come back. So, in my mind as a reader, when I read this, I thought, wow, the reason she could say that to herself is because she has proof. She has
Yeah.
proof of what not giving up can do. Did you think about that when you were penning those words? That the reason why you could say I didn't come this far just to get this far is because you've been in dark spots before.
Exactly. And a lot of times when I find myself in a dark spot or having like drama, I have to remind myself I didn't come this far just to get this far. And
Yeah.
those words always push me because when you think about life, and if you trust your journey, then you know you didn't come this far just to get this far. You didn't come this far just to fail. You didn't survive and have all the other victories just to land with the failure.
Yeah.
So you have to keep going.
Yeah. Such a great thing. Talk to us about the picture, Makeda. When you see that picture, how does it tie in?
I just love my pictures of hanging upside down. For me, again, I think I've said this before, but for me, hanging upside down just puts me in a space of total surrender. And when I'm in a space of total surrender, I'm in a state of flow. I'm trusting the, I'm trusting, okay, what am I saying? I'm in a state of flow. I'm surrendering to the Most High, and I'm literally just trusting God, the universe, spirit, divine powers to carry me.
Makeda, you said something, and I want to actually, I have it still up here on the screen for our audience. That's why I kept this up, because I love that you said something that I can connect with for myself, where I draw a lot of inspiration. You say, I also knew from the many books I had read and movies I had watched, all the greatest heroes and sheroes experience
Yeah.
extreme calamity, but it is the comeback that made them legendary. What has it been like for you to embrace your own legendary status, seeing what you've come out of in so many aspects of your life, Makeda?
Oh, I don't know if I'm legendary, but but I remember in 2008, 2009, when I was losing everything, and it was just like it was literally like just watching walls just crumble around me. I remember I kept thinking about, okay, so this is like you're in your own movie, and
Mm,
this is where there's the plot twist,
yeah,
and the main character loses everything. So you know you can't just lay down and die, even though you want to, because it's not the end of the movie. The end of the movie always ends with the main character becoming, successful and conquering. So you really have to just move through this in real life. And it's like that thought process really kept me going on my like darkest days. And I had so many, I mean, darkest days were like darkest months. They were dark years, but I just kept telling myself that.
yeah. So I'm going to push back on you a little bit here, Makeda.
Yes,
Uh,
Cyrus.
so you mean to tell me, with almost 4 decades in a competitive industry, you don't see yourself as legendary?
Um, I guess everything is how do I want to say that? I guess everything is relative. So
Okay.
it's interesting you would say that because a client of mine just I had him do an interview. It was a written interview, and he turned in the interview questions to me this morning, and I was proofing them. And it's so interesting because one of the questions was asking him about being a master of his art, and he answered back, I don't consider myself a master. And I so consider him a master.
Yeah.
So it was like I was reading his answer, and I almost wanted to edit it. Like I almost wanted to call him and say, "You can't say you're not a master. You're a master." But I had to accept the fact that
Yeah.
he doesn't consider himself a master because he's pushing himself to move further.
Yeah.
So when you ask me, am I legendary? I guess to a certain degree, it's all relative because I've done some legendary things, but I think I'm
Mhm.
still pushing myself to do more. So
Got
it's
it.
all relative because you're legendary, but you don't never let me tell you that you're legendary.
Well, it's not about me, Makeda.
There
But
you
uh,
go.
look, Allie says, I want to make sure I get this in there. When she was talking about you were talking about your photo earlier.
Uh-huh.
Allie says, none resistance. Hello to you,
There you
Story
go.
Dazzle. Good to be able to see you.
Yes, yes,
Alessandro,
yes.
hello to you over there on IG as well. Chris has a great comment here. Makeda, he says, just the ability being able to walk blindly in your faith, that this is not the end of the road for you, as a
Oh,
superpower in and of itself. That is so
that
true.
is so true.
Yeah,
I that statement just shuts it down. That is
yeah,
so freaking true.
yeah.
That's so true. Thank you
So,
for that.
so you're acknowledging your superpower then, Makeda.
Well, I was acknowledging everyone's superpower.
Well, you know what? But this message is so timely, Makeda, because again, we've seen you thrive. We've seen you rise in these what would have been for the reader of the book for these 14 days leading up to this message. This message is you. Here's the thing I thought about, Makeda. So I want to ask you this: you could have easily have not included this particular message. So
Yeah,
why did you decide to include it, and what do you hope the reader takes away from it?
I thought about not including so much in that book. But then, Cyrus, there wouldn't have been a book.
Yeah, there you go.
So I had to just be transparent. I just kept telling myself you had to be transparent. But
Yeah.
again, I would tell myself, well, it's just the person reading the book. So it's okay. Had I known I was gonna be discussing it on the platform,
Well, you know, expect the unexpected.
expect the unexpected. There you go.
Right. So what do you want then us as readers then to realize, Makeda, about the importance of acknowledging even the parts of ourselves that may not be the easiest to acknowledge?
Mm, what do I want? Ask me that again, Cyrus.
Yeah. So what? Because I have talked about myself being a suicide attempt survivor. I've talked
Hmm.
about dealing with depression and feeling less than. I do that not because I think it puts me in
Oh,
the best of light, but because I know people can relate to that, and then
yeah,
it shows them they're not alone. So with this particular day in particular for this message,
yeah,
what do you want them to know about? You know what? Acknowledging your Great Depression, acknowledging the feeling of, what? If it wasn't for my kids, I wouldn't even want to be here. But knowing I have more to do, what do you hope we take away from that?
I think so many people are going through so much right now, and
Yeah,
in terms of what's going on in our country and in the world.
yeah,
And it's so and again, the media and everything you read, media, social media, there's so much negativity out there that just can weigh so heavily on you.
yeah,
I just think if everyone could just reaffirm none of us came this far to get this far. Like, this is not the end. This is
yeah,
just a fork in the road and we have further to go.
yeah,
So if we can all just like keep our eye on the prize, if you can keep your eye on the prize, that's another thing I always tell myself. You can
yeah.
just keep your eye on the prize and just keep forging ahead, like everything's gonna be all right.
Hmm. I thought about that runner you talked about in this message, Makeda.
Mm.
How they get that extra boost
Yeah,
when they can see it.
yeah,
I think that mentality is what helps me to keep looking this way instead of back there.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
for
exactly.
myself personally.
No,
Uh,
that's true.
yeah, and because it's so easy for us to think, "Oh man, I almost tripped back there." I'm saying, I almost this. Instead of thinking, "Wow, I'm almost there."
Yes.
Almost there. Great message, Makeda. This was to me a powerful one. It was very to me reading it again, preparing for today. It's a very vulnerable look at you.
Mm.
But it's also a relatable look at you when it comes to how it's very easy for us, to be able to be overwhelmed by what life is
Yeah,
has to offer at the time, but looking past that for sure.
for sure.
I do like this last thing. I love the way you ended this. Have you ever felt so defeated
Mm.
that you were simply depleted? And then you say, think about something momentous that you overcame. What has that part been like for you? You talked about reading the books, but how important is it for you and for our audience to think about what they've gone through already and overcome?
I think it's extremely important to remember things you've overcome. And a lot of times, again, when I get bogged down in my brain or bogged down in my head or bogged down in some temporary drama, I have
Mhm.
to think about something I've overcame that at that time probably felt as perilous as what I'm going through now, and I overcame it.
Yeah,
So if you just like, if If we can just keep in mind that life is uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill, then when you're downhill, you don't get stuck downhill because you know uphill is coming. And
Yeah.
then when you're uphill, you know downhill is coming, but you'll be back up. It's just that continual flow.
Mhm. Such an important thing. Again, everyone, week number 15 of our series, day number 15 in Makeda's book, I Didn't Come This Far to Just Get This Far. We'd love to know your thoughts. Make sure you guys put in the comment section what's helped you to overcome your own challenges and difficulties. We'd love to be able to hear those. Makeda, another great message. It's where, like that runner, receiving
Right
finish
now,
line. We're
right?
going down now. How can our listeners and viewers stay connected with you, Makeda?
They can find me at both my websites at Flying Over 50 or the Makeda Method, or you can Google me, or you can find me on Instagram, join my website page, et cetera, et cetera. I'm there. I'm everywhere.
She is everywhere for sure. Makeda, thank you again for another great show. Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
the time.
Cyrus. You're breathing now, so that's good.
Yeah, yes, I'm in the flow, Makeda. I'm in the
You're in
flow,
the flow.
and we thank you all for tuning in to another great segment of It's Okay. Now look, I'm about to give you Allie's book, Flying Over 50 at Any Age. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody. Blessings. Bye bye.